gives me immense pleasure to now invite on the stage a personality who's been involved with education for as long as we can think. A personality who actually compiled a paper which was very inspiring to me on the history of education within ISKCON. And if it wasn't for him, my eyes wouldn't have opened up as to how important this service is and how many bumps and troughs it has gone through over the years. I'd like to invite His Holiness Yadunandana Maharaj on the stage. I felt it was appropriate, a conference like this, in the order of sequence. We must first talk about what should be the philosophy or philosophies of education within ISKCON and the challenges that we are facing to come up with one. And I give the stage to Maharaj to kindly address us on that topic. I'd like to mention this has been a collaboration between Maharaj and Rasamandala Prabhu, who's possibly online, and he also helped with this project. Thank you, Maharaj.
Hare Krishna. Mukam karoti vajjalam pangum langayate girim yatkripatamaham vande Shri Gurum Dinataranam Paramananda Madhavam Shri Chaitanyamishwaram Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindubhya evacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Hare Krishna. I feel very happy and very honored to be here in the association of so many educators and senior Vaishnavas very experienced in this field, and also younger devotees who are also entering into the field of education. What I wanted to present is concerned to the topic of philosophy of education. Tapanamishra Prabhu asked me to speak on that. First he asked me to speak about the history of education, which was the paper I researched on. But then because Rasamandala Prabhu couldn't come to the conference, he saw the importance of philosophy of education as a foundation for the discussions in the conference. And therefore he asked me to speak on that. We need a theoretical foundation in order to properly develop our job. Otherwise, we may be doing different things and we may be like an army that has many fighters shooting at different places without any coordination. So we need a sound foundation. That's the idea of having a philosophy. Or later on I'll explain what we mean by philosophies in plural of education. So I like to refer to a quote by Srila Prabhupada from the beginning of chapter 4, a purport from Bhagavad Gita. I'll read it for you. This is a very important quote, basically emphasizing the importance of education in order to fulfill the mission of the Krishna consciousness movement and of good leadership in the world. Human life is meant for cultivation of spiritual knowledge in eternal relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And the executive heads of all states and all planets are obliged to impart this lesson to the citizens by education, culture, and devotion. So it's telling that Srila Prabhupada writes first education, then culture, then devotion. Education is foundational. Next. And I took in preparing, the time I had to prepare this presentation was relatively short, considering other commitments I have. So I contacted Rasamandala Prabhu, who couldn't come, and look at what the job he had done in regard to this topic, philosophies of education. This is an excerpt of his article published in Viplavah, and I'll read it and comment a little bit on it. There is a perceived need within ISKCON for giving more rigorous attention to educational theory and to its systematic development. All educationalists are obliged to evaluate practice against corresponding rational criteria. Although diversity of approach seems admirable, indeed inevitable, there is no escaping the responsibility of making well-informed decisions and promoting high standards through some measure of consistency and agreement. David Carr writes that, in short, any sensible account of education needs to steer a course between reasonable pluralism and indiscriminate relativism. He clearly dismisses rigid absolutism. ISKCON likewise needs to maintain educational standards and specifically to ensure alignment with Srila Prabhupada's teachings. However, repeated calls for such fidelity may obfuscate more complex and indeed more real issues, such as understanding precisely how to align education applied in diverse global contexts with the society's theology. I argue that simplistic approaches or mere appeal to religious mores remain relatively ineffective. In other words, to say that simply that Srila Prabhupada says, that Shastra says, unless we are able to apply it on the ground with a good system and a good global strategy, it remains ineffective. As we were saying, we may be doing different things here and there, but we are not coordinated. And the fact that we are here together to have discussions on these topics is very encouraging, because we can work together to build a sound foundation for getting synergy from all the work we are doing, and do it in a way that really contributes in the maximum level of capacity. Basically, that's the point I got from this statement by Rasamandala Prabhu. Next, please. When we look at theory of education, there are three dimensions. On the one hand, we have pedagogy, or the science or the art of teaching. It's actually ancient. We have it from classical times, from Vedic texts, and in every culture which this element is there. The art of teaching and the pedagogy is very important. And then we have, there should be a theory of education, a philosophy of education that draws from both educational experts and philosophers. In the West, we have many philosophers from the time of the Greeks. They wrote on education and the importance of education in society. And then, of course, if we go to the Vedic tradition, the Brahminical culture, basically it's about that. It's about education. 3 of the 6 activities of the Brahmanas are directly concerned with education. So education is foundational, most important. So there must be a philosophy of education for a community and for a society to develop well. And then in the West, there is a new discipline taught in different universities, at least in Europe. I don't know how it is in the US, which is educational studies. And educational studies includes also the history, the philosophy, the sociology, and the psychology related to education. Like, for example, take ISKCON. If we take the theory about Gurukula and how the schools should be developed, and excuse me if I'm touching a sensitive subject, but we need to face it. If we take that, we have different statements we can make, how it should be. But then our practical application, due to lack of maturity and lack of experience, was a mess. Was actually the opposite of what we wanted to do. Or rather, better to say it, what Srila Prabhupada wanted us to do. So we didn't understand properly the Founderacharya, and we did it wrong. And now we need to rectify. So educational studies is important. It's required to learn from our history and experience. Next, please. So going back to the point of philosophy of education. What is a philosophy of education? This is a very broad topic to discuss just in 20 minutes, but these are just some points to consider. One element is that the application of fundamental principles of a philosophy, how it relates to the work of education. And the Krishna consciousness movement is based, it's actually, and we will hear about that later on from other speakers, it is actually based on education. The first of the 7 purposes of ISKCON discusses education. Later on I'll refer to it again. And a philosophy of education should offer a definite set of principles and clear aims and objectives. We should be clear what we want to do, what are we doing. Otherwise, if we don't know what are we doing, we may end in a total different place, like it happened with our school system in the early decades of the movement. And then we have to go back and rectify. And of course, with a severe damage created, which sometimes may be irreparable. You may have heard that recently the Pope, the Roman Catholic Church, they had this summit discussing all the problems with child abuse in their organization. In ISKCON, it reminded me of some GBC meetings that took place late 90s, early 2000. I don't remember the accurate dates, but around that time, and also acknowledging severe problem affecting the community of devotees, and that needed to be addressed. And also, a philosophy of education should look at the methods and the meaning of education. What methodologies do we apply? Is it contemporary? Are these contemporary? Is it classical, traditional, Vedic, what? How much, to what extent do we integrate the two, in what ways, and so on. And also, of course, it should consider how education relates to society, what impacts has on people, and what they are, how people who take that education are going to become, what values will they develop what skills they will have, and also what is the theoretical foundation these people will have in their lives. And then it looks to application. Next, please. Here I'm quoting the research done by Urmila Mataji I think it's for her PhD work studying different schools in ISKCON. And she underlines the importance of relating the theory and practice. And the schools that were performing better were those that were considering theory very carefully. And they were seeing how that theory, it's truly applied. Not just, as Srila Prabhupada will put it, lip service, that we speak one thing and we do something totally different. So it's very important to connect theory and practice. Next. By the way, I also like to mention that Urmila Mataji did a wonderful job in writing a paper on philosophy of education based on Sri Upanishad, and I do recommend it. Here I'm focusing on the work of Rasamandala Prabhu because that's what I was requested to do, but that's an important paper to be looked at. It's a paper that underlines the importance of God-centered education, as Srila Prabhupada writes in many purports of Sri Upanishad, and how the sambandha or the relationships should be established on that principle. And it's a work that we can consider when we go deeper into establishing a unified philosophy of education for ISKCON, which at the moment we don't have one which is acknowledged by all educators. And I think that's an important point I like to underline, that we need to have a unified philosophy of education, acknowledging also naturally the Brahminical culture, the variety. Brahmanas may be independently thoughtful. So, okay, I'm told that time is running, so next. This will be an example. I don't mean we follow that, but this is a country that is making a statement of a philosophy of education for their country, Malaysia. So, okay, they are emphasizing firm belief in God and values and so on. But the point is that the country is making a statement. But do we have a statement like that? I don't think we have one. We have different projects, and some are going in that direction. This is Vedic, the other no, modern, contemporary, and so many different approaches that we're not working together as we should be working. Excuse me if this sounds a bit prescribing, but this is what I see, and I'm just sharing it, presenting it. Next. So, of course, we have some clear areas of agreement, I will suggest. So, very clearly, education should be in alignment with Srila Prabhupada's teachings. That's clear for everyone. It should be Krishna conscious, it should be God-centered, and it should be consistent with Shastra. That's also, I think, clear, agreeable, and it should produce good results, good people. But then we may have certain areas which are not defined that could be stated in the philosophy of education statement for ISKCON. And this comes next. So There are the issues of contemporary education versus classic, traditional education, how Vedic should be, how contemporary. There are some tensions there. And then exclusive focus on theology and philosophy versus, like say, we should teach only theology and philosophy. We shouldn't deal with other areas of life that should be taught elsewhere. Should we have a university having many disciplines or not? There are different opinions on that. We need to come up with a clear decision. And then what's the role of research and publishing? So much needs to be done. Like for example, if we take the concept of Vedic, how much have we truly researched Vedic, or we are just making a statement without proper, thorough research on that? And then day schools versus boarding schools. Okay, time is getting short. So anyway, there are many points here that could be discussed, and we need to go through them. And next, in summary, what we have presented is that education is essential for the benefit of people and society, and therefore Srila Prabhupada emphasized it so much. Educational practices should be grounded on a sound philosophy of education, and that's required for ISKCON. And at the moment, ISKCON is lacking a well-accepted and unified philosophy of education that we all agree on. And next, and this is the first of the 7 purposes of ISKCON, written by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada, to systematically propagate the spiritual knowledge to society at large and to educate all peoples in the techniques of a spiritual life in order to check the imbalance of values in life and to achieve real unity and peace in the world. Do we have time for discussion or not? So now, thank you very much. So there is time for discussion now.
We have 10 minutes for discussion and question answers. I encourage everybody who's present to please participate. First, Kantiya Prabhu.
Thank you, Maharaj. What would be your recommendation on the way forward?
Well, actually, I think that's the job of the ministry.
I can answer that question, Maharaj, very briefly.
I'm willing to contribute, but Tapana Mishra Prabhu, as the executive director, can say.
So, well, Maharaj has very kindly agreed to participate in the project. His Holiness Hanumat Prasheka Maharaj, who's present here, is working with a team of devotees already. And this project, although it comes in the beginning of this session, is as complicated as anything else, probably most. So it will take months and years of effort to put it together. And if there are devotees who are willing to participate, I know everybody is very busy. Urmila Mataji is also very, very busy. She's done her paper. But if there are other devotees who would like to participate in the project, they can very well please get in touch with Hanumat Prasheka Maharaj, as well as Yadunandana Maharaj. And we will try to synthesize something for the devotee community.
Yeah, the topic is actually urgent, so we need to do something. We cannot just procrastinate, otherwise we will be all dead. I am talking about those who are 50 plus. If we don't do the job quickly, we will be dead. And then the next generation will hopefully do it, but this is very urgent. And it's foundational work. Unless we take what it takes, the time that needs to be done to do it, it's not going to happen. So we need to give priority to it. So we need to see. One problem I see in ISKCON is that we have very few people with too many hats, and then we don't get things done. We need to empower more people, and if we're not able to do it, at least don't get on the way and block that others do it. So we should, if we take it, we should do it. Otherwise, we should have clear deadlines. These are just some thoughts in answering Kaunteya Prabhu's question from the top of my head, but we need to do it quickly, do it soon, and do it well, both.
Neela Mataji. Okay.
Haribol, Hare Krishna. My question is, why do we need to have a unified philosophy of education? Perhaps we can have unity and diversity and have different kinds of schools for the different needs of different kinds of devotees, or maybe you can explain your vision a little bit more to me.
Yes, I think actually there was one slide that I didn't comment on due to lack of time, and I was explaining why philosophies. Maybe we can go back a little bit. Yes, here. So there is no consensus among ISKCON educators, as we explained. And then each educator, and this is part of Brahminical culture, if people are independently thoughtful, naturally each person may have his or her own philosophy of education in terms of how that person will develop his contribution in society. But yet those views should be founded, like in tradition, are founded on Shastra. And there is a foundational element, part of agreement. So yes, there should be unity and diversity, but the unity should be clear on what basis. And if we're developing an educational strategy, we need to have a broad educational philosophy of education that integrates all the individual philosophies. Otherwise, if we do not agree, we may be fighting against each other. Some educators are pushing on one direction and throwing sand on the other group of educators. The other educators are pushing on a different direction and throwing sand on the others. And that doesn't make much sense. It's not practical, it's not productive. So the point is that there should be, in my humble opinion, a philosophy of education that integrates all the individual or the philosophies of education for particular projects. And it is better to cooperate with those who think differently than to fight against them. And many times, I will suggest that in ISKCON, whether in a gross way or in a subtle way, many times we do that, and that's not healthy for our organization. It is not productive. Is that okay?
Thank you, Maharaj.
No, I had the same question, and you answered it nicely. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Go there.
Maharaj, one of the deliverables of education that you expressed is to produce good people. Right? More often than not, we get into deeper discussions of philosophy of education and how to teach and what are the methodologies to be used, while forgetting that what we are intending to produce. So would you please expand on that?
You mean what we mean by good people? That's
Yes.
Yeah, good people means they are devotees of the Lord who follow what Shastra says about devotees of the Lord. Like Jasyasti Bhaktir Bhagavati Kinchana verse, devotees of the Lord who develop the good qualities of the sages and demigods. Not just that we produce Kanishta people, that don't know how to relate to each other and are fighting all the time. So it's important that it should be practical, should be real. Otherwise, what we do is a disservice to society, because we are preaching one thing and doing something different. And then people will say, what's the difference between you people and we? Even worse, because you are claiming to be something you are not. At least we people are real and acknowledge what we are not. So it's important that it's a challenge in the age of Kali to do that. But this is what we got into it, and we need to work on that.
Thank you. There is one from Mahaprabhu Chaitanya Prabhu. He's in the queue.
Thank you so much, Maharaj. Maharaj, my question was regarding similar lines, because before one develops the qualities of the demigods, there's quite a time gap.
Prabhu, if it's similar, if it's done,
no,
can
I
we
mean,
take something
I
else?
just
Okay.
wanted to elaborate.
Please.
So, I mean, how do we identify which kind of skills or qualities a person has before we induct them into a proper education, I mean into varnas? And also, how do we make them mentally prepared? Because a lot of people, they either want to be in the first two categories, I mean Brahmanas or Kshatriyas. And so how do we, inspire them that, they can take other roles? And how do we identify them?
I mean, this is a whole other discussion. I'm afraid we don't have the time for a proper discussion on that. It cannot be answered in 1 minute. But I think during the conference, in other presentations, there will be time for proper discussion to this important question.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Maharaj, thank you for your presentation. Since Prabhu mentioned, Maharaj, that you did some research in the history of education in our society, I would like to ask you, Maharaj, why do you think that after so many years, we don't have a philosophy of education well established within the society?
I will say because we are not working together. We need to work together, to have discussions. Those who have different views sit and have a proper civilized discussion and address all the issues. That's required. We cannot just one pushing in one direction, the other pushing in another direction. Let's sit and talk and talk in a constructive way. This is the instruction of our founder Acharya. Cooperate, work together.
Thank you so much, Maharaj.
My pleasure.
Let us please give a sadhu, sadhu. Well, I just wanted to mention that while we're starting the discussion here, the discussion must not stop. Each of the topics that are being presented here, if you remember the discussions that I showed you on the website, we are going to create a thread on each of the topics. So let me take the example of this. If His Holiness Yadunandana Maharaj came and spoke on this topic, I'm sure there are several questions that are not answered or remain, or several will come when we think about it. You can post them on that discussion thread, and we'll request Maharaj to address them subsequent to the conference as well. So this applies to all these sessions that you will see today. They will be available as a session thread on our website.